Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter, and I am a curator in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. I split my time with the Kislak Center and the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies. The Schoenberg Institute is a Institute for Manuscript Studies, kind of broadly defined. We have a physical collection and we have a digital collection, including our manuscripts and manuscripts from other places. So we do a lot of work, and part of the work that I do is outreach and video in particular. I'm very interested in showing books on video because it's a different experience from just looking at flat digitized manuscripts. So Coffee with a Codex is our weekly program every Thursday at noon Eastern Time. I come online with one of our books and I show it off. And you are free to ask questions. Just put them in the chat. And usually my colleague Amy is here. She is not well today, but I'll do my best to keep my eye on the chat. So if you have any questions at all, if you want me to zoom in on anything, just let me know and we'll do that. So this guy is shelf mark LJS 216. LJS means it's in the Schoenberg collection, which was given to us by Larry Schoenberg several years ago. It's an interesting little book and one that I love a lot, and I hope you will love it too. It is a copy of actually 3 texts by a guy named Johannes de Sacrobosco. So he was active in sort of the early part of the 13th century, and he was sort of a scientist. He wrote a lot about astronomy in particular, and also math, which is related to astronomy in some ways. And his writings became very popular and were copied many times over and influenced a lot of later scientific writings, particularly in the West. So this book was written in Paris, France, between 1256 and 1270, which would have been probably soon after his death. It's hard to say. The only date I have is he was active in 1230. So he either would have been old or maybe it was soon after his death. It was not, the binding now is modern, velvet, although it's terribly worn now. And it's also kind of tightly bound, so I'll do my best not to make too much of a mess while I do this. All right, so let's get started right away. It opens up with this initial, and there's actually 2 other initials in here, and I'll zoom in. So a couple things to point out immediately. One is that the margins, although the book is not large, the margins are very wide. We have very wide outer margins and also bottom margins, and they may come in handy later, so we'll have to see what happens with that. So I'm going to zoom in on this, and what we have, it's a kind of a typical thing. You see initials that are similar to this in a lot of other manuscripts from France from around the same time. I'm thinking specifically of a medical manuscript that we have that was written in Paris in the 13th century, which also has initials like these. And what do I mean by like these? What we have is a teacher, and we know he's the teacher because he's sitting up a little bit higher than the other ones, and his students are on the right, and they're a little bit lower. In this case, he is teaching astronomy, and we know that he's teaching astronomy because he's pointing at something that's up sort of in the sky. So you can imagine that that's some kind of sphere in the sky, and so he's pointing up and talking about that. That's what's happening. And then, of course, there's this lovely decoration around this pink and blue, which we're going to be seeing a lot of, a little bit of gold, which, let's see if I can see a little, there we go, a little bit of the shine of the gold. So it's a really nice little initial. It has been worn, sadly, which again is sort of, you expect to see that especially if you have initials that are on the first page, because often it'll go through periods where maybe there's not a cover, or you have a wooden cover that sort of rubs up against it. Now this is a much more recent cover, and it's not actually that badly worn. It's just a little bit worn. Let's see. Other things that we'll keep seeing, it's got sort of it's neat Gothic writing, and there are notes. We'll see that there are notes in the margin and other things. Joyce says at the top it looks like there is a hand, and Elizabeth says it looks like a little dragon, and yes, let's take a closer look. It is a little dragon. That's part of what's worn here. This is a little dragon. You can see his blue leg here. And his little head goes out, and it almost looks like it joins the letters that start there. Actually, I haven't looked very closely at those. It's actually easier to look closely when I'm on the camera because it can get closer. That's really nice. This is a really nice little manuscript. I'm very fond of it. It's not very long. It doesn't have a large number of leaves, but it's an attractive little thing. All right, so let's start turning the page because we do want to look at more. All right, so we have an initial, and we're going to see these are really typical, again, of sort of French manuscripts at this time, and also manuscripts from other places. Probably the blue and red here. So blue. Claire's asking about a critter under the teacher's feet. We'll go back and look at that in a second. More initials. Also, there's a circle. You see this circle here? I think that just means somebody was not careful and set a cup or something on the page at some point. So that's an accident. Is there a critter under the feet? If there's a critter, we have to look. I don't think. Well, I don't know. It's a little bit hard to tell. You might actually be able to tell better if you go to the digital images and look at the high-res images. There might be something there. It's a little bit hard to tell, but I don't want to get too stuck on that. Let me get this. Here we go. Okay. It could be a little dog. Maybe if we find another initial, we'll do that. We'll see. So there's several things. So this is the first text that is in the manuscript is called Sphera Mundi. So it's about the spheres, and so you're seeing more notes, and some of them, these appear to be added much later. So we've got a manuscript that was written by a single hand. So there's one scribe who wrote the whole thing, and then other people who came through and added notes later, which is pretty typical. This is kind of interesting here because when we get a little bit further on, we're going to start seeing diagrams in the margin, and we can see that here I don't think there was. It's a little bit hard to tell. I don't think that this is a diagram that has been erased. I think that it was outlined but then never filled in. So this is sort of an incomplete diagram, which again is something that you actually see in a lot of different circumstances in medieval manuscripts, not just diagrams. I've seen this in books of hours where artists sort of came and started a job and didn't really finish it. So it's just sort of interesting. Here we go. Boop. Okay. There's also a hole in the parchment up here. It's sort of fun. They just decided they were going to use that piece of parchment anyway, even though there was a hole in it. So the hole is from, this is a question from Joyce. The hole probably is from when the parchment was made. It's very round like that. I don't think it was cut. Oh, hello. Let me see. It's a little bit hard to tell, but I think that it happened when the parchment was made. So there was a little hole in the skin of whatever animal was used, probably a calf. This seems like it's probably calf skin. So maybe the calf had a bug bite. And then when the parchment was made, the way parchment's made is they take the skin and they process it in various ways and then stretch it on a frame. And if sometimes the person who makes the parchment will actually sew the holes up, which is interesting because then you have like little scars in the parchment, but sometimes they don't and they stretch out. And so I'm pretty sure that that's what happened, is it was just a hole that got stretched during the process. So I'm noticing something kind of interesting happening in the bottom margin, and I'm going to show you here. There's a frame that's been drawn on the pages, and it's light. It's maybe like a pencil, but I think you can maybe see it here. There's like 2 lines coming down. And here, there are prick marks on the bottom. So this is where whoever prepared the parchment to be written on made this frame, and they used the prick marks, which are these little holes, as guides. So there's no holes at the top now. It's been trimmed away. And we'll have to look for more holes on the sides, but you usually see them on the sides of the pages that the preparer uses then to make straight lines that they write on, and that's how they get these nice straight lines. Okay, Martha is asking, could you please explain what modern foliation means? Okay, so there are 2, if you look up in the top margin, there are 2 numbers up here. This one happens to be, I think that's number 60, this is 68, and this is 10. The 10 is written, the 10 is the modern foliation, and it's written in pencil, and the 68 is in an older hand, and it's written in ink. What this means is that the manuscript the pages were originally numbered, or the folio numbers were numbered, and then probably when we got the book, or maybe when Mr. Schoenberg got the book, somebody went through and renumbered it, starting at 1 and going all the way through. And the reason this is important is because we have 68, and then we have 69, but then we have, let's see, no, that's right, that's 70. It's just that, so there's a part, something is missing from the front. That's sort of what this is telling us, is there used to be a bunch more. We only have what we have, and so we start from 1. So that's why there's those different numbers, and that's what the record means. So we have more notes. Let's see, gotta keep going. We haven't even gotten to the good part yet. I just want to show you guys everything. I love it. I like this one a lot. Oh, and it's got that pretty one. And then we've got this, where the parchment's been cut. Actually, I wonder, again, if that's the edge. I can't tell when that was done, if that's the edge of the parchment or if it was cut later. Let's see. At some point, we're going to get to the end of, and I just want, there's all these sort of edges, all these fun. Yeah, cut, so either, okay, so Matilda is asking if cut or edge of the skin, question mark. So is this actually the edge of the skin when it was cut off of the animal? And so the parchment was created and this is how the parchment was made originally, or was there once a full page and it was cut? And sometimes you can tell because the edges of parchment often are stretched in a way that is kind of particular, and once you know it, you sort of can say, oh, that's the edge that's stretched. And it looks different from if somebody took a knife to it later there. Joyce is pointing out a note in the note in the drawing. I know what you're talking about, this one here. Yeah, that's very pretty. And Martha says the parchment is beautiful. It is. It's really nice. And you probably, I don't know if you can hear it, but it makes this lovely sound here. Matilde, right, you can often see, we're back to the parchment, that it's thicker. It is thicker, yes, where it stretches, it's sort of thicker on the edge. Okay, here we get to our first sort of major diagram and the most major one. And this is, it's not labeled, but it's the zones of the Earth. And it's one of the things it's such a typical diagram. You see these a lot when you look in like diagrams about astronomy, oddly, and other things, or the Earth, because the way that the medieval intellectuals, I guess, thought about the Earth was actually similar to the way that we do it. So let me zoom in so you can see it a little better. And that is, you have the equator. So the equator here is in gold. It's pretty. I'm going to move it so you can see it shiny. You have the gold, and then you have the torrid. Around that, you have the torrid zone, which is where it's really hot and not nice to live. And I think that that's why it's in black. So you have this black area, because you'll see there's another black area at the top, and that would be the Arctic zone, which is very cold and hard to live in. And so it could be that they're using black there. And then you have the pink and the blue and the white, which is the temperate. And I don't know if there's relevance to the blue and to those different colors, or if it's just the temperate zone. But that's sort of what it is. The temperate zone is the zone where it's nice to live, and the black zones are zones where it's not so nice. So that's what's happening there. And if you look at a lot of manuscripts of this type, you'll see this a lot, diagram a lot. It's a very typical kind of diagram. So now we get to the more sort of explicitly astronomical ones. And it's important to remember as we look at this, that at this time they believed that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything orbited around the Earth, which meant that they had to figure out ways to explain things like why the planets would go one way and then go the other way, right? Which is sort of one of the interesting things about learning more about medieval astronomy, because in some ways it had to be very complex to explain this movement. So here's a diagram with the Earth in the center, and I don't know if this is the moon. I think this is the sun because it's bigger, but I'm guessing these are probably Mars and the moon, and so this is a diagram sort of showing some of the ways that they move, and you can see, maybe that's not the moon, because you can see that this object has its own orbit moving around, and this is like it's going back and forth. So when we see it from the Earth, it's going one way and then the other way, and the reason that it's doing that is because it's moving in a circle. And they were right, it is moving in a circle, it's just moving in a different kind of circle. We're all moving around the sun. They just didn't know that. There's a quick question from Claire. Is there a pigment reason that the zones omit green? They could not have had green pigment. There isn't any green pigment in this manuscript, so maybe they just didn't have it. I don't, aside from that, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. They did have green pigment. You see green pigment. So here is another diagram. This is a lunar eclipse. So the Earth, again, is in the middle. The sun is on one side, and the moon is over here on the other side. So this is showing that when the sun shines against the Earth, it will block out the moon, and then you have a lunar eclipse. So this is how a lunar eclipse happens. And one more before we get to the next text. So this is a solar eclipse. So So we have the Earth again. The Earth is in the middle, and here is the moon, and then the sun is on the other side, and the moon blocks out the sun, and then it makes a shadow on the Earth, but that means that we can't see the sun. So this is how they diagrammed that. And again, all of these are diagrams that you see a lot when you look in these kinds of manuscripts. All right, so the next text is Algorismus. Again, these are all texts by Johannes de Sacrobosco. Part of it's missing. So we have this great explicit at the end with, again, these gorgeous letters with the pen work. And then it starts, I think, probably in the middle of a word. So that is that. Tony is asking, do I know the name of we would call it a script and not a font. A font is what you get on the computer, and the script is when you write it by hand. So the main script is what we call a Gothic book script. There are a lot of different flavors of Gothic, but that's the general one. And those in particular, rubrics, it's called Black Chancery script is what I'm seeing in the, for these ones, Black Chancery script. I wish Amy were here because she's actually a paleographer, paleography is the study of scripts, and I am not one, but I'm going to repeat what that says. All right, so we have Algorismus. It starts incompletely. It looks very much the same. Again, this is all written by the same scribe at the same time with these blue and red initials and these chancery, now we know what they are, chancery initials here, which are really nice. I think this is even a different hand than I've seen before. Lots of people coming in and making notes. We've got this is nice, I haven't seen this before. This is a catchword, which is the first word or two that starts the next page, and these are used at the end of gatherings, which is when you take the parchment and fold it and make a booklet, just to make sure that it's bound in order. Tony is asking about the ink. It's probably a iron gall ink, just because that's, I think, usually what they wrote with. So it's a sort of an iron ink, and that's what gives it its color. It looks like there's been some erasure here, and then somebody wrote over it later. I don't know why, hard to say why, but somebody did that. More of this. Let's see. So that was a shorter one. Then we have the next text is called Computus Lunaris, which is the computation of the moon. And we have another initial with the teacher sitting with the students and pointing at the spheres and the sky. I forgot to point out the first time that they're all tonsured. So they all have tonsures, which is their hair is sort of cut in the middle. You can sort of see it here, and that means they're monks. So the teacher and the students are all monks, which is not unusual. Karen points out, worth noting, that the title of the work in the second section gives us the word algorithm. Yes! Oh, yes, Algorismus, yes, is where we get algorithm. So there we go. So I'm mindful that we're running out of time. This always happens. I always say, there's no way we'll have time. And then we run out of time because I talk so much. But let's see. Oh, yes, some more. I just want to make sure we get some more of these because these are really lovely. So here is I'm not sure what this is, but it's a serpent. What it is a serpent with his tail in his mouth. So you've got the serpent with a tail in his mouth, but it's very pretty because we have this little pink flower and more of this pink and blue around, and he's very handsome. I don't know if it has any relevance to the text or not. And there are at least a couple more. Yes. So this is the table of solar conjunction. And again, we have a little flower and some pretty decoration. I had to look this up. The table of the solar conjunctions is when the Earth and Mars are obscured to each other by the sun. So when the sun is between Earth and Mars. And again, you know, conceiving of the Earth as being in the center and then the sun and the Mars sort of moving around, this would have been an interesting thing for them. So you could see why they would take that. Let's see. Yes, Mathilde points out that the serpent with the tail in its mouth is the Ouroboros. And there is probably some relevance to that, to the text, but I don't know exactly what that is. Here we go. Let's see. That might be, I think there's one more. Yes, there's one more initial here with this one. This is nice because this I think is the nicest of all of them. So you can see, I'm pretty sure that's the moon that he's pointing at, and you've got the one student sort of holding his hand out. And yeah, the gold work is nice, and actually their faces, you can really see their faces here, and it amazes me sometimes how these artists were able to get, you know, personality into these little, they were really good artists, you know, working with what they had. So let's see. The drapery is beautifully drawn. They do a nice job with fabric. So I'm just going to keep turning the pages. Oop, here we have, I don't know what that is. I don't think that's mentioned in the record. Is that just on that page? Yeah, some kind of index, I guess. So, but it looks pretty with the little lines, the swirly lines at the end. So it's neat because it's, you know, it's just really nicely done with the gold, and the writing is very pretty, and it's got a lot of color. But they weren't afraid to write, you know, to write in the margins. Although there's fewer notes here. Oh, this is interesting. It looks like there was a hole in the parchment that's been patched up, and it was patched up before the manuscript was written, because the ink is written. You can see this patch. That's what that dark, that sort of slightly darker, and the ink is written over it. So the parchment, the other, if you remember, there was that other hole that we saw earlier that it was just left, but this one, maybe because it interacted with the text, they went ahead and put a patch over it. And it's still here so many years later. Oh, one more. Here we go. One more little flower. Why did they write in the margins? Probably to add information, or to make whatever notes. I haven't read the notes. As far as I know, nobody has sort of come through and done a quick look, but usually it's to add information. Sometimes to make corrections. Usually when people made corrections, they would actually change the text itself, or they might make marks in the text and then make notes in the margin. And that's it. That's the end. Thank you for joining me today. That was fun. I think we looked at every single page too, which we don't always get to do. So I hope you come back next week. We'll be looking at the Book of Esther, and you have my email address if you want to email me. And I hope you all have a great week.